let's talk about access modifiers. It's these words that you've seen a lot of places, such as public, and you'll see other words that we're going to mention. They're there to stop human errors. They're there to restrict access to something from others. Inside the computer, there is no restrictions. The computer, let's say the CPU as an example, has access to every location in memory, right? It's not made for the computer. It's made for human errors. It's made so that we don't make mistakes. If you want as an example, you could probably go, let's say in the language Perl, and there is no accessors. So you could write anything and it's accessible anywhere from anyone. Is Perl a good language? Of course, it does everything for reading files. Text. Is it a language you want to work on? Hell no. It's so complicated, hard. It makes your life complicated. And if you work with a team, you better hope that they're good. Otherwise, you're going to hate your life every second of it. Anyway, let's stop talking about Perl. Going back to this. So these access modifiers are there to help us restrict access to things that others shouldn't have access. And again, it's there to make sure that errors are less prone to happen, the human errors. Remember that we work in teams, never one person. Every application is going to be hundreds of people maybe. So these access modifiers is to stop, we'll give you some compiler errors when you try to access something that's not accessible by you, right? So we're going to try a couple of this. So the first access modifier that we see is called public. In public, let's go ahead here. And in public, everyone has access to it. And again, everyone is not people. It's actually other objects, other things. Remember, objects interact with each other, right? The next one that we have is called protected. We're going to come back to this in the future, but I'm just going to go through these access modifiers because they're really important. So protected, you could think of it as more something that's specific to only certain people. And these certain people are family members. So in short, we're just going to say restricted to family. And we're going to come back to this when we're going to do inheritance. Okay? It's a bit down the line, not too far. I can't spell. Let's just fix that. So after that, we got this other access modifier, which is blank. This is a specific to Java. It's specific to Java. You're not going to see it in any other languages. At least I haven't seen it. Might be possible. What it is, this blank, you can't Google blank, so there's a name for it. It's called package private. And what package private does, it allows anyone within your package to have access to it. How do you write this specific accessor? Well, you erase whatever's there. So that public over there, right now, this class start is this one now. If you don't specify it, this is going to happen. This is the default accessor. Now, you're going to see a lot of people either not want you to ever use that because it causes issues that's not good. And you'll see some people utilizing it and really utilizing it and make really good use of it. And the way we're going to go from now is most likely we're not going to utilize it until we go a bit further down. Or maybe we might not even do it at all. Either or, we'll see where we get. And the last one I want to specify is private. Private is the one that says only I could access it. So only the class itself, no one else. If I make something private, no one has access to it except for themselves. So before we go in a bit deeper, notice that these access modifiers, there's 4 of them: public, protected, package private, and private. And again, I wrote these things in the front because that's the stuff you need to write here. Okay? Now, this goes from the least private or the least restriction to the most restrictions. So far, we've always been doing everything public. This is, again, bad practice. If we make everything public, it's the same as saying you're going to give me access to your bank account. Do you really think I'm not going to go in your bank account, take a little bit of money? Of course I will. Maybe I'll take everything. You don't want to give full access to everyone. So the rule of thumb that we're going to play with is we're going to go the most private, and only then, when it requires someone outside to come out, we're going to change that private to something higher, right? And for now, we're most likely going to play with private or public. I'm going to ignore the other two. So what does that mean for us? So if we go back to a person over here, notice right now we didn't mention any access modifiers. The only one we have is the default one that comes with our class. And even then, we could erase that. So the first thing we're going to do is add these access modifiers to our attributes. Why would I want to add these access modifiers to my attribute? Well, it's the same as saying right now, actually, let's say you're an object person and you have a name. Is it okay for me to change your name? Can I name you beep bop chilibla? If I can, be my guest, let me know, call me up, message me on YouTube, I'll do it. I would love to name someone something else and we'll go and change it. Of course not. Everyone has their names and it's private, and you registered your name with, I don't know, your city, county, country, whatever, when you were born. A name given to you by your parents. Of course, you could change it, but it's a big hassle. But no one else could just name you. Another reason to have private, let's say your bank account again. Right? We'll come back to protect it later on, where your bank account could maybe be shared with your kids. But for now, this is fine. So you'll notice that since I made this private, I got 5 related problems with it. And that's the problem with private. Is the moment I made this, well, actually, we'll just go there. The moment I made this private, no one outside of person could utilize name. Notice it's grayed out. If I take this off, notice it's back to being purple, saying it's being utilized. In this case, it's being utilized down here. Right? So where are these problems? These problems are right back here. You'll notice it's all red because inside the class, inside the object start, or in this case, inside our main, I don't have access to name at all. Right? Because they're private to person. In these cases, again, we want to be able to read the name, but we don't want to be able to change the name. So this shouldn't be allowed, right? But this should be allowed. I should be able to see what your name is. As my student, I want to know what your name is. As anyone else, we want to know who you are so we could talk to you. So how can we make one thing happen and the other not? How can we read from it, but we can't write to it? So in these cases, we create something called getters and setters. They're a way to access the object through an extra loophole or through an extra way without being able to do something else. So in this case, we said we want to read it, but we don't want to write to it. So now what we could do is create a new method. Actually, I'll put it under my little actions verb thing here. Could create a new public method. In this case, we're going to return the string and we're going to say get name. Notice it's already, the IntelliSense is filling it up for me because this is a normal thing to do, right? We're just creating an action to get the name without allowing to be changed over here. So get name. And all we're going to do here is return name, right? So what's going to happen is rather than saying person1.name, we're going to utilize the method to access that value. And when we do this, notice that the red is gone, right? We have access to it, but we still don't have access to modifying it. So now I can't run the application. Again, it's made so that programmers don't make a mistake. It's not made for the computer. The computer doesn't care for this. So now I can't change the name, right? We could create also a setter. Again, another, I can't spell. Sorry, I have too many things on my, okay, there we go. So public void, we're not returning anything. We're gonna set a value, we're gonna set the name, and we're gonna give it string name. And this, we're gonna say this dot name equals name. Now there's two things that happen here. One, you'll notice this keyword this, we're gonna come back to it in a second. But you'll notice that now I created a public getter and I created a public setter. We come back to here, set name to Reza, and person 2 set name to Meow. You'll notice it's the same exact thing, right? Except we're not doing equal signs. What we're doing is we're calling the method set name. We're passing our value Reza, and inside of that, we're making the equal sign. So it's the exact same thing here, but with an extra step in it, right? And over here, we set person 1 dot set name, oof. Right? Same thing, just an extra step. Now, the problem with doing both the getters and the setters, well, what was the point of it? The whole point of making the name private was to disable people's access. It was to disable them from being able to change my name. But then again, we went and created a public get and a public set for the same thing, for the name. This is the same as saying this was public from the start. Right? So we got to be careful with this. I see a lot of my students, they just create this for everything and name everything private because I forced them to put it private. Understand, we made this private so that we disable write, but enable read with the get name. This is really important. We're limiting the access of other objects to this attribute, to this field variable, right? So if we have both of these, we're going against what we're trying to do with this private. So you got to be careful with this thing. Now, secondly, you'll notice this little keyword here, this dot name. So let's talk about that and we'll end the video there. So this is a way to reference the object itself, the person object currently, right? Whichever the object is. Why do we need this keyword in front of name is because of context. If you come in your classroom, you might be the Dave, right? Inside your classroom, you're Dave. Everyone calls you Dave. Everyone knows that Dave is you. But the moment you leave your classroom and you're inside the school, there is not only one Dave, but there is 5 or 20 or 30 other Daves. How do we know which Dave you are? Well, in this case, when you're outside the classroom, for people not to mistake you, they might call you Dave Anderson, your family name together, right? Because in the classroom, there's only one Dave. In that context, there's only one Dave. You're the Dave. But in the outside world, we have to call you a bit differently. Now, the same thing happens inside class objects and methods. There is a context created whenever we have these bodies, these little parentheses. Inside the body here, the context here, we created a variable called name that supersedes everything else. So for me to have access to the field variable called name, I need to put this. If I don't, look what happens. Notice that the color of the IntelliSense is telling you their gray equals gray. This is basically telling you this is meaningless. Why? Because you took this variable and you made it equal to itself. So basically, you didn't change anything. If you notice the highlighting, when I click on one of them, it highlights all the matching variables there, right? If I highlight this name over here, notice that line 7 is going to be highlighted, right? Line 7, line 17, line 26. This is telling you that this is the same thing. So for me to kind of take off the context of the current setting, this context, I have to specify this. To specify, I'm talking about the current object. Different language, they might use a different keyword. Talking about the current object, and I want to access the field variable called name. So this object dot name, make it the current context name. Notice now when I highlight it, it's only these two, and when I highlight this one, it's line 7. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.